Hi, I'm Bidisha. I'm from Zubaan, and this is the Cultures of Peace Media Archive program. And today we are in conversation with Anungla Zoe Longkumer, who has been a part of Zubaan's journey and has also been a part of the Cultures program of 2020, which is its 10-year anniversary. So, hi, Anu.
Hi, Bidisha.
It's been the year of the pandemic, but I think all of us have been brought closer. So I think we'll just dive into our conversation. Um, so Anungla, you have grown up in Shillong for quite some time, and then you chose to go back to Nagaland. So how was your experience, and what were the choices you made in going back to Nagaland, and the kind of patriarchy that also exists in indigenous societies?
Yeah, so thanks, Bidisha, for having me here. Yes, it's true. I've lived most part of my life outside of Nagaland, though I was born here. I grew up in Shillong and have lived in other places in the country, and I've also traveled a bit. My decision to come back to Nagaland was actually because of my mother, because she wasn't keeping too well. So that's when I thought I should spend some time. I wanted to spend some time here with family. I'd been pretty much out of the family radar actually. So I just felt that it was about time that I spent some time here. The thing is, when I lived away from Nagaland, I tended to romanticize, you know, Nagaland and everything that I remembered of it. But when I came back, it was in a way a culture shock because the first thing that you notice is the underdevelopment. I mean, as soon as you get out of the airport and you hit the road, then there are all these potholes and dust, and so it just hit me straight away because while landing, you're on the aircraft and then you see this green expanse and below the clouds, and it just felt so nice. I was like, yes, finally, from the city and urban, like from the city landscape, to come back to something that was so natural. But yes, I was disappointed in finding that it hadn't changed much since the last time I had visited, which had been like about a decade ago. And after having lived in places where you are pretty much yourself as a human individual, it was it took a while. I'm still getting used to it, to find that I am so easily dismissed when we are having conversations because people feel that this is not something for women to talk about or to be involved in, to be a part of. So yes, that is still hard to get used to. But besides that, it was nice for me to reconnect with family and that sense of community that is so prevalent here, and also the generosity of spirit that the Nagas possess. It was quite overwhelming at first. Having been in places where you're just the individual and you just fend for yourself, and everyone fends for themselves, and which is fine. I enjoy that too, that kind of independence. But it was interesting for me to again get that sense of community and all that. And it was also interesting for me this time when I came back to find so many artists, to meet so many artists who had studied outside of Nagaland or had worked outside, and then they had come back to Nagaland and they were starting all these creative spaces and enterprises, which made me think that yeah, I could survive here.
That's quite interesting. And once you did come back, you put together a volume called The Folklore of Eastern Nagaland, which collecting stories from across 6 tribes, if I am not wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
is that somehow also connected to your idea of coming back to your community? Um, and would you like to talk more about it?
Yes, very much so. It just came to me actually. So I'm really, really grateful that I got this opportunity. The thing is, you see, the tribe I belong to, the Ao Nagas, we were the first tribes, we were the first community to be exposed to education, and of course we were one of the first ones to be converted, because what happened is that the missionaries arrived in our lands first, so we were exposed to education and converted earlier than all the others. So what I find is that the Ao Nagas are further away from their traditional past, so to speak, you know. So this project that I got was to make a book of folklore from the more remote area of Nagaland, which is Eastern Nagaland, and it was a huge eye opener for me, about what our traditional past was like, because in these areas, people are still closer to uh, how life was, before. Of course, when you go to these places, you find people using mobile phones and as much as they can, because connectivity is also quite poor actually. But still, they are connected. They are connected, but they still live a pretty traditional kind of lifestyle. And what I've also found out is that even though we are quite distinct communities, from each other, we also share many things in common. And so I could totally relate, to seeing how these communities were, hearing their stories, and just watching them, do the everyday thing, going to the fields, and I could imagine how it was as well for the community I hail from, I come from. So it was a huge thing for me, I like to say that it settled something in me, and this is the kind of feeling that I wish every young Naga to have. And therefore I dived into this project with great enthusiasm, to make this book. And I targeted, like, the target audience was actually children, but also didn't want to also wanted it to appeal to adults as well. So the language is very simple, and if you look at it, the texts are in columns like how newspapers are, so that it's easy reading, for kids and all. And it was bound in such a way that it should last, just like a hardcover and that kind of thing. Yeah, so I worked it around like that, so that it would appeal to the young, because that's the kind of feeling I also wish them to have.
It was a lovely book. I remember seeing it. And to pick up from where you mentioned about feeling calm about collecting your stories, there's a poem in The Many That I Am, ODC, recited by Tei Keditsu, where she talks about this homecoming. And this homecoming is also connected to this idea of storytelling that is so rooted by women generally from the community. So, when putting together your work, especially in literature, what are the sort of stories and what are the sort of like women you come across that you want to center in your work?
Mm. The interesting thing is, when I visited the villages, all the people that I spoke with, or who came forward to tell me the stories, were the men. And when there were women, I wanted to also interview the women. And every time I posed a question to them or directed a question at them, it would always be the man in the room answering, and yeah, it's very like that. The women also feel very shy to speak, and it's only with regards to the tattoos, when I would also show them the tattoos that I have, then the eyes got broken and then they would open up a bit. But generally it was the men who told me. But there were also some very, very interesting stories about women, the folklore and like the myths and all that. What I found interesting was that there, of course, women are always associated with, in the domestic scenario, in the kitchen, in the field, doing field work. But besides that, I came across accounts where women were feted as warriors, because they had also taken heads, because it was at that time when head hunting was a practice of the Nagas. So women were also uh, rewarded and, feted for being warriors, as strong as the men. The interesting thing was in one case where the women took heads of the enemies and brought them back to the village. So there was a big celebration in the village. And normally, if it had been a man, then he would have received the headhunter's tattoos. But the women did not receive those tattoos. They were instead given an ornament to wear on their wrist. But it was an ornament made out of cowrie shells, which were highly, highly valued as currency at that time. So, there is that difference in the way they honored the women warriors, but it's there. It's there. And another interesting thing was how there were these stories of sky women, sky women who descended on a cloud, or who came down from the skies, and it was the men who captured them and took them as wives. And these women possess supernatural powers, and it's quite amazing. So for me, that was just an affirmation, of the feminine energy and the power that a woman holds. So these were the stories that I definitely wanted to put into the folklore book. There were lots of stories of women, being described for how beautiful they were, and rather poetically, of course. They were likened, they would be likened to this flower that grows high up on a tree on my cliffside, or, like it was very poetically written. But there were enough of those, and we hear enough of them. So I made sure that these other stories, women as warriors, women as supernatural super women, that they were put in. Yeah.
So, do you think that was a difference in like putting together many data in that way? You had English to work with, and you could ask for submissions, and there was no chance that the man in the room would dominate the conversation. So, how different was it putting together the many that I am?
Yes, it was different. It was different. Uh, it was a different sense of responsibility that I felt. In the beginning, I just went out with no idea, and I started from scratch, you can say. So for the folklore book, I visited as many villages as I could, which turned out to be about 73 villages. And there were some stories which I got whole, but there were like lots of stories where I just got bits and pieces of it. And the thing is, these stories are not told uh, regularly or enough. So I had to jog people's memories. And one thing that I found was that if I just sat with them and just relaxed and they got used to me being there, then the details would start coming up, and they would be doing something else, and then they would say, oh yeah, this also happened in that story. So there were many, many stories where I just received the information, in bits and pieces. And so it was up to me to, and of course, I also received the stories eventually in Nagamese, the lingua franca, because I don't speak the language of these communities that I was researching on. So then I had to do the transcription of the Nagamese, and then translate them into English as it was, and then try and fashion out these stories. So with the many that I am, all I had to do was basically send out, the little brief that I had, and then wait for the writers to respond. And when it did come in, I actually went into this work with no expectations of what to find. Like I had said earlier, I was just very curious to know what women in Nagaland were thinking about. And so when the stories came in, there were very few which are excluded actually, and it was also because either they did not like the revised suggested version that I'd come up with, and they objected to that being the final thing, or else I found that the stories were kind of lacking a bit, in substance. Yeah, I can say, because there were some really new writers who sent in their work. So for me to putting this, The Many That I Am, actually it just happened. It just happened when the story started coming in. I began to see again, this thread. It is a it was this common story in each one of them. So it was just the sequence of how I wanted to put it and all that I worked with. And the actual edits, yes, I did do editing of them, but again, I, as much as I could, I tried to leave the storyteller's voice, the author's voice in the stories. So in a way, it was like two different responsibilities. I mean, the sense of responsibility that I felt for both the books. For the folklore book, I felt very much in control. I mean, totally, And for The Many That I Am, it was always like, okay, where do I stop? you know, I don't want to talk over the author's voice, So it was that kind of a feeling, and both were really interesting, and I learned a lot. I really learned a lot from both projects.
So, just to again talk about a little bit about Many That I Am, it's got a very wide collection in terms of length and breadth and content also, and it talks right from it captures history also. For example, Eastern story and the Japanese War, and then it also brings together new writings, like you said, what were young Naga women thinking. So, how did it feel to put together a volume that is capturing generations of thoughts of Naga women and putting it down in a language that is also different from your own?
Well, the interesting thing is that English is my mother tongue. Sorry to say, but this is I can't help it. I can't help it because I grew up like that. And even when we were in school, right from we were really small, we were only encouraged to speak in English, and also encouraged to speak English at home. And since my mother was also a teacher of English, it just was a natural thing that we would be speaking in English. So I mean, it I feel that there is a gap, between, like, say, writers like Tamsila Au, Isirin Kire, and perhaps of course Mona Lisa Chankicha, even though she's not there in the book. I feel that there's a gap, and then you find the younger authors, the newer writers. And what I've also found is that, for example, Timsel Au, her stories are, with the backdrop of the armed struggle of the Nagas. A lot of it is that. And also Istirin Kire has written a lot with the backdrop of the Second World War, and, that, that kind of thing. With the newer writers, of course, the contexts have changed. It's there's the backdrop of corruption. There's a backdrop of abuse. Women's abuse, and yeah, things like that. So it's, and also I find that the younger writers, they write with a lot of hope. Even though they may be telling the kind of sad stories about the women's struggle, they write with a lot of I think that's the word. They write with a lot of hope. yeah, one case in point is Vili's runaway son in the book, in The Many That I Am. So in that story, this woman is just going through hell because of what her son has done, and there was also the involvement of the underground, and she's struggling a lot. But it just ends with her looking out of the kitchen window and seeing these yam leaves, new fresh yam leaves growing, that's just outside her kitchen window. And that says a lot, because if you know the Naga thing, the yam leaf is food, you know it's something that is consumed by humans, and it's also something that is fed to the livestock, the domestic animals. So yeah, in these subtle ways, I feel that the younger lot, they write with that kind of um, outlook. Yeah, yeah,
So just to briefly touch upon the English thing again, is that it's quite interesting
yeah,
how language that's being owned, and like you spoke in a previous webinar as well, it's a language of an invader but has been owned by the community. So, in terms of looking at Nagamese also, which is a language that has developed over time, and then taking those stories and translating this, how do you think young women have owned this language in their own way? Like you've talked about the volume also. So, do you want to go briefly into that?
yeah. So yeah, I'm very, very impressed, when I hear young Naga women speak, or read their writing, because they're just so fluent nowadays, they're really fluent. And I think as storytellers like writing stories, I think they really have the potential, and they are really in the good way, using the English language to express themselves and all that.
And also in terms of like translation.
I
Sorry, did I?
Yeah. So when it comes to the translation, it is very difficult. Like when I was doing the folklore book, I was like, okay, it's another thing to hear a storyteller tell a story, and you know how these things are. Every storyteller will add his or her own, embellishments to the story, and there will be variations. But when it came to actually putting it down in print, you know, I felt very nervous many times, because there are a lot of stories that are also common within the community, from village to village, or even among the different communities. So there was a time, when I would mention this, like, oh, I also heard the similar story in this village or from that community. And the first thing that the people would say was that they are wrong. Our version is the correct one. Our version is the original one. So it became like, wow, now which version do I put into the story? And how do I make that choice? Why, like it's on me, to make that choice. So I did it with looking at how old the village was, to be able to trace the source of the story, because a lot of there are a lot of new villages as well, like when people move out of the old village and then they form new villages and all that. So I had to research and see which was the oldest village, and also the terms and phrases, etc., which are also quoted in the story. I made it a point to write that these are the terms and these are the phrases that are used in the village where the story is taken from, and also I try to capture as much of the storyteller's way of speaking as possible. So in the folklore book, in many of the stories, I add little bits, which the storyteller, uh, his or her way of speaking, you know, little words that they use, cho, hey, are, like, yeah, just small things. And I tried to, because I had audio recordings of this, I listened a lot to how the storyteller was saying it. And when I shaped up the story, then I tried to keep it as close to the storyteller's way of saying it, that was just my way of trying to keep it as authentic as possible. And when it came to, I think, to the many that I am, I received everything in English, so that issue didn't arise. Yeah.
So it talks about identity and homecoming, and that's something we touched upon in terms of not just the writing, but also in the visual content of the many that I am. So, how do you think the visuals also influence younger women to make their space in graphics and illustrations, and talk about their Naga identity also in that way?
I think, in essence, Nagas are very visual people. You know, I think it's just a very natural thing for young Nagas also to, to be drawing, to be illustrating, to be designing. And definitely they are, just as with the writers, as in the writing, there's a lot of introspection going on, mm, because of what happened to us historically. There is a big gap, between how things were and how things are now. And definitely we are, you know just like it happened with me, I was always looking for my roots, you can say, to have this feeling in me that yes, this is where I originate from, and or this is what my foreparents, ancestors used to, this is how they used to live, and this is how they used to think, and this is how they used to sing and dance, so this is always also a search in me. So I think it's the same thing with all our young illustrators, young artists as well. And I think because now we are, there's so much of introspection going on that I think Naga women are looking at seeing themselves as, human, as individual humans, as quite distinct from their father, their brother, their husband, you know. And so there is a lot of that, they draw themselves, they draw the female form, they they see themselves, and it's there, you can see it there in their artwork.
So, just like when you talk about introspection, I think that introspection and your like love for storytelling. So, how does it influence your many different avatars as a poet, as a musician, as a filmmaker, as a writer?
So I always feel very uncomfortable when these when I'm described that way, yeah. I just feel I never specialized in anything. I mean, I didn't even want to study in the first place, and it was only because of my mom that I kind of just got my degree, but as soon as I got my degree, I was like, yeah, that's it, I'm done, I fulfilled that, and but so much of time had gone, and so I was just trying to feel myself, just trying to find myself in a way. And of course, music had always been a big part of my life, and ever since I was very young, I've always been writing, and some of my writings come out with in as a melody, with a tune. And so it has, writing and songwriting for me has been like, is therapy for me. And so there's always the struggle within me, how much do I make public, and how much do I just keep it personal, and to myself. So writing is just, it just comes, and like I said, I do it for my own therapy. Filmmaking, it happened to me. I've always loved watching films, this is something that, one of my pastimes, watching films. But when I came to Nagaland, interestingly, when I came to Nagaland, it so happened that Films Division landed up here and we're conducting a film workshop. And it was my mother who actually got me, to join it. She was like, okay, this is happening, why don't you join? And at the same time, I was in a studio. I had just decided to, okay, let's, decided to record a song. I just wanted to get it out of my head, basically. I thought, let me just put it down. So I had just got entered the studio, and so I told my mom, I'm going to lose 9 days because the film workshop was 9 days. And I told her, I don't think so because I'm going to lose 9 days in the recording studio. And she was like, in 9 days' time, you're going to learn something new. And so I couldn't argue. I couldn't argue with that. So I thought, okay, that makes sense. So that's how I joined the filmmaking workshop. And boy, I mean, I'm glad I did because I just love that medium. Everything just came together because they only took 20 participants and they divided us into two groups of 10 each. And they just had everything with them, all the equipment. And they just said, go, make your film. And from my group, nobody wrote anything. Everyone is supposed to write down ideas of like film ideas, but nobody wrote anything but me. So it turned out that it was my film that got made from my group. So I was totally involved in it. I was like totally locked into it. The story, I was basically doing everything and I just loved it. I loved it. So that's how I got into filmmaking. And then I had nothing with me, no equipment, I mean, no camera, nothing. So I started to just assist friends, my filmmaker friends. So in some of the short documentary films, I'm doing sound, I'm recording the location sound. And in another one, I was assisting the director. And then I started to get onto YouTube, and then, my friends started sharing uh, films with me. So then now I watch films with a little differently. So this is how I'm educating myself in a way. I'm just trying to learn as much. So now I have got myself a small camera. And during the lockdown, when the pandemic happened and we were all shut in at home, so in the beginning, I was trying to find out what was behind all these headlines. So I was doing a lot of research and following investigative journalists and reporters, just trying to dig, and find out what is going on. But then I started to go down this really deep hole, and started to feel this depression descending on me. And then I thought, this is not happening and I can't let this overwhelm me. So I just switched off everything. And I had no WhatsApp, no Instagram, no Facebook, nothing. And I just loved it then, because with all that cut out, I began to actually sit down and focus on what I wanted to do and what, all the ideas that I have in my head. So then I sat down with my notebook and I began to storyboard all the film ideas that I had. And that was the most wonderful time for me. And I think it wouldn't have happened if lockdown hadn't happened, actually, because you kind of get into a role, like you do a project and then you just go into another project. And for a long time now, I've just been thinking that I should do something with all the heaps of writing that I have. I mean, stuff that I've written down and all the ideas that are in my head. So this was a good thing that happened. So I think now I'm going to be making some films of my own, because so far I've worked in other people's projects and I've also made a documentary which was not shot by me, but I worked with that found footage, and edited it and wrote the narrative for it and all that. Yeah. So yeah, again, like I was saying, like the essence of art is storytelling. So whatever you take up, if it doesn't have a story, then no matter how fantastic your cinematography is or how flowery your language is, I think if there is no story, then there is nothing.
So, just you said that you do not like this title. So, how would you describe yourself?
That's a tough one, Bidisha. Yeah. The thing is, I think I have an issue. Yeah, I think I have an issue about. I don't like to feel limited, because I feel that if I say I'm a writer, then I feel like I'm just boxed in that, and I'm just like, oh no, but I'm much more. I'm much more than this. And then when people say, oh, you're a filmmaker, I feel like I am not a filmmaker, in the sense I'm still a novice. I'm still learning, you know. And even when people say he's a writer, I kind of feel like I feel small, when all these things are sort of tagged on me. Yeah.
So even though you consider yourself a novice, I think you were quite a trailblazer in organizing music festivals and in the music scene. So, how was
Mm-hmm.
it putting together music festivals at a point of time when like things like Zero was not that happening, or how did you as a woman navigate the event industry or the music industry and organize this?
Mm. See, when we as in me and my partner Keith Walang, with whom I was doing this work, when we started it, it was so new in the Northeast. And I had had some experience of doing this in Bombay when I was living in Bombay, of organizing concerts and festivals. And one day I just thought, what am I doing here in Bombay? There's so much that needs to be done back home. And that was one of the reasons for me coming back to Shillong from Bombay. And we started doing events in a very small way in the beginning, and then we began to think, yeah, let's continue doing this. And so it was at a time when we had to create the events. People had no idea what event management was about, and things like that. So even working with the pandal people, because all our stages are built with bamboo and wood, we had no metal trussings and yeah, nothing like that at that time. So even working with the vendors like them, they had no idea what we were asking of them. And even when it came to say black masking, they were like, oh no, no, we don't use black here, black is only for funerals, and they would give us all these velvety pastel colors, that they use for weddings. So it was a big thing for us, and then we began to feel that, okay, we need to invest now and buy our own cloth, and start investing in this kind of stuff, the production stuff that we needed. And it was high stress, let me tell you, that it was really, really high stress. uh, it was crazy. And of course, a huge part of it is the funding for doing, um, creating these events and making them happen. So we would go to Guwahati, the regional offices, and try to get sponsorship, because in the beginning we tried it through the government, and there are lots of government departments who by rights should be organizing, funding these events, cultural events, but they just were not interested. So we targeted the corporates, and we would go to Guwahati, and then in Guwahati we would meet all the regional office people, and all they were interested in was slashing the budget, and uh, not looking at the events. So then we started to make contacts in Calcutta, with the East Zone people in these corporates, and then again it was the same thing. They considered us as like the backwaters, and like, yeah, I'm sure you can just do this event with this small amount, and we wanted to prove that even though we're in the Northeast, we can still put up good events, and we can still promote our artists in a good way, and not just say, yeah, we are here in the Northeast, so we're just making do with what we have and just accept it. No, we didn't want that. We really wanted to put up good events and promote our artists in a good way. So then eventually we started to go to Bombay and Delhi and try to meet with the bosses of all these companies, and it turned out to be much, much better, because then we could sit with them across the table and just talk about the event and not talk about slashing budgets. So, so these were things that we really pushed, and it took us many, many, many years. And as a woman, it was tough because, of course, I was also so much younger, so I couldn't quite, I also used to get overwhelmed, when the men, who are, the vendors, whether it came to sound, whether it came to lights, whether it came to stage, anything, they were all men. And even though my partner was a man, I mean, we had to also, share the responsibility and, look after different things. But as a woman, I really had to swallow a lot of, indignities, as you can say. And like I said, I was so much younger, so I used to get overwhelmed. And I remember one time when we were doing the Roots Festival. Now, this Roots Festival was a traveling festival. So we would take this festival to every state in the Northeast except Tripura. That was one place which, we just couldn't work out the logistics for that. So we would have, and we were pretty ambitious in a way, because we would have two foreign bands, two international bands, some of the leading bands from the metros, and then we would have the well-known bands from the region, and then the local bands, as well as we would also have a lot of cultural troops as part of it all. And the Roots Festival used to be and a morning to evening kind of a affair, so we would have everything on that stage. And we felt that this was important because a lot of the youth in the Northeast, they are very dismissive of their own cultural traditions, because they want to be Western, and they want to, they embrace Western music. So we felt that it was important to have both, because when we had the cultural troops on stage at our festival, where we also had international bands present, or even bands from Bombay, Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore, wherever, then there was this nice exchange, so the our local artists would feel proud, to see a local troupe on stage, on the same stage as an international band. And then for the international, or for the visiting bands, it was wonderful for them to witness a cultural dance or a cultural song, that was of that place, where we were having that festival. So
considering where we live, I think there's so much scope for being able to say stuff through music.
Our culture, our tradition now is much more rich, and we have so much more to offer to the world.
you just show them some way out, like like you can do something if you're really dedicated to whatever it is that you want to do. So this was a very, very important factor for us to have this kind of thing. And even though the show was the show, where we had the concert, but for us, the more important thing in every place that we went to was the workshop, so every musician in the festival needed to give a workshop. So whether it was songwriting, whether it was guitar playing, drums, percussions, bass, anything, they had to give a workshop. And so we had workshops everywhere we went, and they were free. They were, free, but of course the show was ticketed, but that also we kept it at a minimum, But like I was saying, it was high stress because it was at a time when Northeast wasn't open as it is now. There were so many restrictions then. We had to get inner line permits for all our Indian artists and crew members, and then we had to get restricted area permits for all the foreign nationals. And for example, just between Nagaland and Manipur, there are so many check gates, so we had to just bear up with it and go through each check gate, and we had paperwork that was like like a whole ream, and it was really, really, really difficult to coordinate all that. And again, like I was saying, as a woman, there was one incident when I was looking after, there was this Italian Italian trio that had come down, just part of the Roots Festival. And I was Keith was looking after the Shillong one. He was preparing the Shillong show, and I was in Nagaland. And we were doing two shows, one in Kohima, one in Dimapur. And in Kohima, when we were doing the sound check, I had given the time to the Italian group, that their sound check would be at this particular time. So before that, we had the local band come on to do their sound check. And they were taking their time, almost playing a whole full concert, on stage. And I was trying to hurry them up and trying to get the sound man to take control and, just say, fine, I've got your sound down, can we leave the stage, But it was all taken very badly by the men. One of them from the local group, he actually came up to me and charged me, and he said, hello, are you a professional sound engineer? And, that kind of thing. So, like I was saying, I was younger, I was a bit overwhelmed. Today, if that same thing happened to me, I think I would know how to stand my ground, and, you know, take it, and stand my ground. But it was a really, really tough time then. And after every festival, before every tour ended, I would be like, I'm not doing this again next year. This is it. I'm not doing it anymore. And I would always be saying that. And before I knew it, we had already begun work for the next festival, because it was strong, the need to do something for the arts. And I think we established something solid here in the Northeast by doing all this, and especially because we also insisted on originality. We didn't want bands coming on stage and playing covers. That was not the idea, So out of the Roots Festival that we conducted, we did it for 6 years. And then it just didn't happen again. But during this time, a lot of original bands came out, because they were inspired by what had been happening.
Yeah, I mean, this story, like all the personal details, are very, very inspiring, and I'm glad to hear it today. And Anung, like coming from that, from organizing Roots in those circumstances, to putting together a webinar panel discussion as part of this year's Cultures of Peace program, where you are the curator for the music, for the entire music component. How much has changed in this time in terms of putting together something for online audiences, uh, putting putting panels of women musicians together and talking about gender, especially when so much stress is given on proving our own selves and trying to show that we're not vulnerable. And today we're having a really vulnerable conversation as well. So how has this experience of putting together this entire panel and this component of cultures been?
Well, first off, when I got the call from Zubaan, I was a bit reluctant because it's an online thing, and I was like, I'm not sure I want to get into it. But then sense prevailed, I suppose. And I thought, yeah, okay, let's do it, because it's about music and musicians, it involves local artists, and this is what I'm really, really interested in. If I can be the channel, to bring people together and bring them on a platform where they can express themselves, sure, I'll do it. So first off, I find that there are so many more artists and women artists doing their thing these days. Back in the day when we were doing Roots Festival, it wasn't so easy to find women artists. At the most, maybe they would be fronting a band, and that's it. And these days, I find that there are a lot of women now, just a lot more. And so it was quite easy for me to find 5 panelists, 6 panelists, of kick-ass artists, women artists. And technology was a huge boon in this case because it's so easy to communicate now. It's so easy to exchange information, exchange songs, videos. It's just the blink of an eye. All that happens. So it was nice. I could just sit in the comfort of my home and connect with all these women. And in terms of bringing them together, I think foremost in my mind was, of course, having them as women, as women in their own right, and having, achieved so much in the music scene, having them on, in this panel. And another thing I think that I, foremost was them coming on as women, as strong women. Yeah, on the gender issue, definitely these women, actually, these artists, they really, really want to be understood and to be looked at as professionals, in the music scene. And I think that is a big thing in them, to be treated as professionals and not just eye candy or, just there to add some spark or whatever to the band on stage or whatever. They really want to be taken as professionals, and I see that, and I think I know where they come from, from that point of view. Talking about gender, so therefore, when they want to be taken as professionals, the gender issue is a little bit in the what should I say? The background, when it comes to that. They just want to be considered as professionals first and foremost, so that is a big fight for them. So I think women artists, for example, the women artists that I brought together for the webinar, the big fight for them is to be taken as professionals, and if there are certain requirements that they need, technical stuff, for their performances and all that, they want to be heard as a professional, and they want to be listened to by the crew as a professional. Yeah, so then talking about gender, it's for sure they're feeling it, for sure they're feeling it, that they are not as respected, or they are so much more easily dismissed because they're women, even though they are as skillful as the men are in music, I am not sure if they are very vocal about that fact, that their songs reflect this, that they are women. But for sure, there is an artist like, say, for example, Tipriti, who has written songs like I Am, she's asserting herself as a woman, as a person, in her own right. So I don't know how much of their music reflects this thing in them, but I think even though they are not very openly talking about this, it is very much there, and they're very much feeling it.
I think it's all quite captured in the title of the webinars, Owning Her Space, and how this is also about space making. So I think when you talk about being professional also, and then again coming back to Many That I Am, and looking at how all of us are trying to make our own identity, but at the same time working in a place where we want to be seen as professional. So how does that come along with something like, say, tattoos? And in the intro of Many That I Am, how tattoos were looked down upon in the colonial times, and now how it's also being taken up by younger women as a sign of identity and also striving to still be professional. So how would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Well, the tattooing culture, tradition among the Nagas, for the women, it was the rites of passage, so very much that the identity thing there. Because as a young girl, when she's about 8, 9, she gets her first tattoo. And speaking of my tribe, the Ao Nagas, so the Ao Naga girl would get a first tattoo on her calves, on her legs. And this denoted that she was now a full-fledged member of the community. So it is a very, very exciting thing for a young girl, because without a tattoo, she was just a young girl, but now with the tattoo, she is part and parcel. She's very much a part of the community. And then, like I was saying, it's rites of passage, and the growing maturity of a woman. So every other year, actually, it all depended on the tattooists, who were also women. Most of the tattooists in the Naga, among the Nagas, were women. So it would depend on, because these tattooists would be traveling from village to village. So there was no set time when a young girl would get tattooed next, So over several years, she gets tattoos that show her, that denote her maturity. So with every new tattoo that she gets, then she is becoming more and more the woman, of her community. And when she gets the full set on her, then she's of course considered of marriageable age, and that's when all the rituals or the customs for betrothal and all that happen. So when the British came, when the invaders arrived here, the sad thing was that there was this lack of tolerance for anything native, anything local, and they just dismissed everything, that the Nagas were doing. And so they began to everything got polarized, because the missionaries arrived, and then suddenly you were a Christian or a non-Christian. And if you were a Christian, then you were treated with respect, and if you were not, then you were almost excommunicated. And so people began to see that there was a difference in how they were being treated, if they converted or if they didn't. And also the conversion also happened, I think, rather smoothly in a way, because we already had the belief of the afterlife, and the missionaries were talking about heaven, and we also had the belief in the good and evil spirit, and then there was Satan and there was God, so there were so many of these things that they could relate to in the new belief system. So I think that conversion also happened much more easily than if it had been quite different, Yeah. So what happened was that then even the Naga people themselves began to consider everything that was traditional as being bad, as being a heathen, as being a savage, as being wild. And so they began to adopt new ways of dressing up, new ways of, just a new outlook. And they themselves began to shun everything that was traditional and all that. And therefore, also the tattoos, because largely the tattooing, like I was saying, for the women, it was rites of passage, but for the men, it was associated with headhunting. And headhunting was one practice that the British were determined to make a stop to, So there was a huge, big divide that happened. And so even the Nagas themselves began to associate tattoos with something that was of the old belief and therefore not acceptable and not at all good, not at all pretty, not at all appealing, to have all these markings on your face. So then, yeah, that's what happened. These days, I find that a lot of young Naga both boys and girls, men and women, are wearing tattoos, but they are not necessarily Naga tattoos. A lot of them are just they'll tattoos from other cultures, Polynesian especially, or other modern tattoos are more appealing to them. And I feel that, I suppose subconsciously this thing is still there because we are largely Christian now. We are all converted, So that thing is there at the back of the head, I think, back of the mind, that our Naga tattoos are of the old belief, and therefore it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. But when I came to Nagaland, I myself had this experience, of somebody coming up to me and saying, look, it says in the Bible that thou shalt not mark thy skin, And this person said it after seeing all the tattoos on me. So that was an eye-opener for me too, to find that someone quoting the Bible and saying, it's a sin to mark your skin. So it's a very complicated thing because young people are wearing tattoos. They are wearing tattoos, but they are tattoos of other cultures, not Nagas, not Naga thing. And of course, by rights, of course, the contexts have changed totally, because earlier a man, for example, had to earn his tattoos. He had to go and make a kill. He had to show his valor and his courage, and then he would get the tattoo. But again, like I was saying, the contexts have changed. Things have changed now, and even some of the old folk understand this. Like when I went to a village, there was an old woman, there was an old grandmother who was wearing the same tattoos that I am wearing, and she was so pleased to see me wearing these tattoos, and so she told me, take these tattoos as far as you can. So I felt that she totally understood it, and I felt that this was the permission that I got from my forefathers, foreparents, foremothers, that now the contexts have changed, and therefore I can also apply my own understanding of what these tattoos mean, because in my research, a lot of the meanings are lost, sorry to say, and a lot of the meanings are lost, the reasons why all these geometric patterns were applied on the skin are lost, and therefore I add my own understanding of what they mean. Like for example, the tattoo on my chin, I take it as a sign of my willpower. That isn't something that I got from an old grandmother in the village. This is something that I have attributed to it myself.
It's actually quite interesting because when you talk about women also being tattoo artists, do you see Naga women also being tattoo artists now, and what's happening with that idea of storytelling through tattoos? I mean, you touched upon some of it already, but I just wanted to see if the Naga women still practicing tattooing as part of the work.
Well, the traditional tattooing it's stopped. The traditional way of tattooing is lost. I mean, not completely lost, but it doesn't happen anymore. And but we do know from our research, and it's just not me, but I have a couple of friends who are also doing similar research on tattoos of their own community, or of generally of Naga tattoos. So from all our findings, we do know what the process is like. We know what organic ink, how the organic ink was made. We know what was used as needles. Basically, it was like a totally organic implement, an instrument made out of plant thorns, plant fibers, plant resin, and sticks and all that. So that nobody is doing except for one tattoo artist, Mo Naga, who is going in that direction now. Yeah, he started tattooing with a machine, but now he's going in the direction of doing traditional tattoos. As for the women, I haven't heard of very many women tattoo artists in Nagaland or among the Nagas, but I think there are a couple, but most of the tattoos are men.
I'd like to take a step back and think about some of the things that you've said, and your connection with music and all of the many hats that you wear is the strongest. I felt throughout the interview, at least. So you mentioned in a podcast with Aku recently that you took an impromptu workshop with children who were HIV positive in Imphal, I think. And
Yes.
so how does those workshops, so how does that work of yours, apart from songwriting, but also like, expanding your musical boundaries with different communities work, especially when it comes to children and children from marginalized communities?
So basically, that visit to the orphanage happened kind of spontaneously. I happened to be in Imphal, and these are the children that Aku works with for his project called A Native Tongue Called Peace. And so, yes, I was keen to go there and meet the children. And when we landed up there, Aku introduced me as someone who does music. And so one guitar appeared, and they were like, let's hear a song from you. And I'm not a performer, and even among children, like something just freezes in me. So I was like, let me not sing a song yet. How about hearing you? And of course, the kids were a bit shy because it was the first time that I was meeting them. They were meeting me. And so I just spontaneously said, let's write a song together. Then, we can sing, both you and I, we can sing. And so what I did was, like I had mentioned earlier, when we used to do the Roots Festival, the workshops were very, very important to us. And there was a group had come down from Australia that one year, Aurora Jane and Massive Change, and she had conducted this songwriting workshop wherever we went. And I happened to be there at one of the workshops. And so when I was sitting with the children, I kind of just remembered what had happened at that workshop. And so I kind of just improvised on that. Yeah, so I got this piece of paper, and I would ask each child to write a sentence, and then we would fold it to hide that sentence and then pass it on to the next child, and then she would write a line, and I would prompt them and say, this morning I woke up and I felt, and then I would just leave it, and then they would fill in the blanks, kind of thing. So then I would just prompt them by just starting a sentence and having them just complete that sentence. And then when we opened up the sheet, there were just all these random sentences, but they all made sense, and in exactly that same order. And that's the amazing thing, That's the amazing thing of what happened. And so I took the guitar and I just started playing some chords, and this melody just popped into my head. And so I kind of tried to fit the lyric in, and then it just happened. And it was very, very simple. I think I was just using like 2 chords, or maybe it was 3 chords. Yeah, and that's it. And then another guitar appeared. So one of the children, she was the guitar player in the group. So I just taught her the chords that I was using, and the two of us began strumming. And then all the kids, like, they started looking at the paper and they crowded around the paper and started to also add the lyrics and all that. So it was a really, really beautiful thing. And yeah, at the end of it, there's a song in everyone's heart, and it's I think just holding that space, for children like them especially, who, there's so much of trauma that they have experienced and gone through. And so it's, if just for a moment, we can lift them out of that, out of that experience, and give them again another experience where their thoughts can spiral, higher and higher, and they can have a totally different experience from just doing that. Why not? That's something that's one experience that I really, really enjoyed. And it was nice also because what happened was then I got the children to write down all their names. I got them to write all their names, and then we added that. So to the melody, we just sang out their names, and they were all very excited because it was all their names. So that really turned out beautiful.
And I think I wanted to ask one last question, because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and because of all the things you do and your deep connection to storytelling as an individual, as a part of as a Naga woman, how do you plan to move forward in the pandemic, and how do you plan to tell your stories through the many mediums that you use and you move between and you mix up also?
Well, definitely I want to put all the storyboarding that I've done, manifested into actual films. That's one thing I would like to do. It might take a bit of time. But one thing that has come out of this project with Zubaan is the podcasts. I think this is something that I could do. I also like the fact that it's a listening thing. I grew up with radio, I love radio. And I feel that especially these days, children are not, the young, or just anybody, are not listening enough. And even if it's music, they're watching the music, and it's like the video that's the most important thing nowadays, and music takes a backseat. Of course, the video is important, but, not at the cost of the music. So actually, doing this podcast thing had crossed my mind even before the Zubaan project came along. But when it did, I was like, oh my God, I better be careful what I wish for, because it just happened. And right away I said, yeah, I'll be happy to host the podcasts. So I think I would like to do more podcasts, even if it's just on my own. And through the podcast, I can also talk about the folklore. I can interview people. Yeah, I think there's just so much that needs to be discussed, that needs to be talked about here in Nagaland. You just pull out any subject, and needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed. So I think I would like to do more podcasts, and of course make my films. Writing, I'm always writing. It's just I need to make sense of them and shape them up into something nice. Yeah, like that. So yeah, thanks to Zubaan.
So thank you, Anungla, for being a part with us throughout this journey, and thank you for taking the time out today.
Thanks for having me. So now I'm going to offer you a song. It's a song I wrote 10 years ago, but ever since lockdown began, the song kept on popping up in my head because it reminded me of that time when I wrote the song. And it's just that the difference was then it was just me going through what I was going through, but during when lockdown began, globally everyone was going through this same thing, because this song was born out of heartache, but rather than wallow in self-pity and drown in my tears, I decided to write a prayer. So the song is like a prayer to my higher self, that self who dwells in a higher realm of love and fearlessness. So I hope you enjoy it. And as an accompanist, I met just a few days ago, I met Rokoseno. Asi actually had introduced me to her, and I immediately felt very, very comfortable with her. She gives me a lot of space and confidence, and it's only our third meeting, but we've already decided to dive right in and do a live take of this song. It's not a song that I've been singing regularly, but we've just decided to do a live take and offer you the first take of the live take. So uh, it is as it is, and I hope you enjoy it. But I must also mention here that I could not have done it without help with a lot of help from my dear friends Im Chatsung Im Chin and ASI and Hope Center for Excellence here in Dimapur, in whose piano room we are doing this recording, and also Jongma from JHC Records, and Nurhe Kate, who are helping me do the live take. So thank you, everybody. And last but not the least, my gratitude to Zubaan for giving me this opportunity and the platform where I can feel safe and be as vulnerable as I can get, but still be okay about it, and I'll still be able to smile and live with it. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. I call your name to the sunny sky, from blue oceans to snow mountains on high. I call your name to the sunny sky above. We are children thinking we've achieved our aim of paradise. When strings of the heart are rent asunder, unwound from what's known, freed in the vast unknown, from deepest oceans to either high, be found again, to become again. I call your name to the sunny sky.